What drove the Spanish Inquisition to torture a woman for 28 days simply because she showed mercy to her neighbor? In the whitewashed chambers of the Holy Office, where silence held more weight than screams, Isabel Daranda's story reveals the horrifying price of human compassion during one of history's darkest periods. Her crime was not theft, murder, or even heresy. It was kindness. And for that single act of mercy, she would face a torture device so cruel that death would have been a blessing. My world, before the silence and the screams, was one of simple things. It was the warm, earthy smell of baking bread in my small home on the edge of Seville. It was the gentle rhythm of the seasons, the feel of cool river water on my hands as I washed my linens, and the quiet satisfaction of a day's work done. My name is Isabel, and I was a baker's widow, a woman of no great importance, known only for my steady hands and, perhaps, a kindness that I had inherited from my mother. It was this kindness that would be my undoing. My neighbor, Elena, was a quiet, haunted woman. She was a converso, one of the many Jews who had been forced to convert to Christianity under the ever-watchful eye of the Holy Office. She lived in constant fear, her every action scrutinized, her every word weighed for signs of her old faith. Her husband had been taken by the Inquisition a year prior, vanishing into the maw of their stone fortress, never to be seen again. Now, she lived alone with her young son, a small, frail boy named Mateo. One sweltering evening in late summer, a fever took hold of the boy. I could hear his weak, rattling coughs through the thin wall that separated our homes. I found Elena in her small garden, weeping, her hands clasped in desperate, silent prayer. "The physician will not come," she whispered, her voice a ragged thread. "He says it is God's will. He says the boy's soul is tainted." I looked at the child. He was burning with fever, his small body trembling under a thin blanket. My heart ached with a simple human pity. I was no physician, but my mother had been an herbalist, and she had taught me the old ways, the simple remedies of the earth. "There is a poultice," I told Elena, my voice soft, "of willow bark and cool river clay. It will not cure him, but it may break the fever's grip. It is a simple thing." That night, by the light of a single candle, I prepared the remedy. I ground the dried willow bark, mixed it with cool, smooth clay from the riverbank, and added a drop of lavender oil to soothe the boy's spirit. I took the poultice to Elena's home. It was an act of mercy, a gesture from one neighbor to another, one mother's heart to another's. As I applied the cool paste to Mateo's forehead and chest, he let out a soft sigh, his trembling beginning to subside. Elena looked at me, her dark eyes filled with a gratitude so profound it needed no words. I did not know that another pair of eyes was watching from the shadows of the alley across our street. Eyes that belonged to a man named Rodrigo, a jealous baker whose own bread was always sour and whose heart was even more so. He was a familiar, a lay servant of the Holy Office, a man who traded whispers and accusations for a few coins and a sense of holy importance. He did not see an act of kindness. He saw an opportunity. 2 days later, they came for me. It was just after dawn. The black-robed familiars of the Inquisition moved through the morning mist like wraiths, their faces hidden in the shadows of their cowls. There was no knock. The door to my small home splintered inwards, and they were upon me before I could even scream. They did not speak. They did not need to. Their presence was a suffocating blanket of absolute authority. They dragged me from my home, my bare feet scraping against the rough cobblestones. I saw the faces of my neighbors peering from their windows, their expressions a mixture of terror and a terrible secret relief that it was not them. I was taken to the Castillo de San Jorge, the grim fortress of the Inquisition. The air inside was cold. A damp, tomb-like chill that clung to the stone and seemed to seep into my very bones. I was led down a long, dark corridor. The only sound, the echo of our footsteps, and the distant, muffled sound of a man weeping. I was thrown into a cell. It was a small, windowless box of stone, empty save for a thin straw pallet and a wooden bucket. There I remained for 3 days, in absolute darkness, in absolute silence, with nothing but my own frantic thoughts for company. What was my crime? What had I done? The image of Elena's grateful face, of Mateo's peaceful sigh, replayed in my mind. It couldn't be. It was just an act of mercy. On the 4th day, I was taken to the interrogation chamber. It was a large, whitewashed room, unnaturally clean, the walls seeming to absorb all sound. In the center of the room, behind a heavy oak table, sat the Inquisitor. He was a man named Father Tomás, a Dominican friar whose face was thin and severe. His eyes, 2 black burning coals of zealous certainty. He saw heresy in every shadow, and sin in every human heart. Isabel Daranda, he said, his voice a low, cold whisper that seemed to slither across the room. You are brought before the Holy Office on suspicion of witchcraft, heresy, and practicing the forbidden rites of the Judaizers. I stared at him, my mind reeling. No, I stammered. I am a good Christian woman. I have done nothing. Nothing? Father Tomas's lips curled into a thin, cruel smile. We have a witness, a man of godly standing who saw you perform a dark ritual. You were seen applying a witch's poultice to the son of the heretic, Elena Vargas. You were heard chanting in a strange tongue. It was not a ritual, I cried, my voice echoing in the dead silence. It was a simple remedy of willow bark and clay. The boy was sick. I was only trying to help. Willow bark, the Inquisitor mused, as if the words themselves were proof of my guilt. A key ingredient in the potions of the devil's servants. And you aided a known apostate, a woman whose husband was condemned for his secret Jewish faith. You are one of them. You meet in secret. You practice your dark arts. You will confess. You will give us the names of your coven. There is no coven, I sobbed. There was only a sick child and a neighbor's kindness. Father Tomás's eyes hardened. Your compassion is a mask for your heresy. Your silence is a fortress for your sins. But the Holy Office has tools to break down such fortresses. He made a small, almost imperceptible gesture with his hand. 2 guards stepped forward from the shadows. You have been found uncooperative, the Inquisitor said, his voice a flat, final judgment. You will be put to the question. You will be purified of your lies. The guards dragged me to the center of the room. There, sitting like a monstrous, waiting beast, was a torture device. It was a simple, brutal construction, a tall, triangular frame of solid wood, with the top edge sharpened to a cruel, narrow apex, like the spine of a great wooden beast. It was the caballete, the wooden horse, the Spanish donkey. My breath caught in my throat. I had heard whispers of this thing, this instrument of unimaginable agony. The horse will teach you to speak the truth, Father Tomás whispered, his face close to mine, his breath smelling of stale wine and righteousness. It has a way of breaking even the most stubborn silence. The guards began to strip my clothes, their hands rough and impersonal. I was left exposed, vulnerable, my shame a fire that burned hotter than my fear. They grabbed me, one on each arm, and began to lift me, forcing me towards the sharp, unforgiving apex of the wooden beast. My mind screamed. Death would have been a blessing. This was something else entirely. This was a descent into a hell crafted by the hands of holy men. The guards lifted me, my bare feet kicking uselessly in the air. My mind, a frantic animal in a trap, could only focus on the monstrous simplicity of the device before me. The wooden horse was not a complex machine of gears and levers. It was a testament to the brutal purity of pain. They forced me astride the sharp triangular apex of the wooden beam, and a scream of pure, unendurable agony was ripped from my throat. It felt as if my body was being torn in two from the inside out, the focused, wedge-shaped pressure a violation against the very core of my being. "Confess your sins," Father Tomas's voice whispered, a cold serpent in the sea of my pain. "Confess your allegiance to Satan. Give us the names of your coven, starting with the witch Elena Vargas." Through a red haze of agony, I shook my head. "She is innocent," I gasped, the words tearing at my throat. "There is no coven." The Inquisitor nodded to the guards. They brought heavy, rough-hewn stones bound with iron rings and began to attach them to my ankles with coarse rope. The added weight was a new dimension of horror. It pulled my legs down, increasing the pressure on the sharp apex, stretching and tearing muscles I did not know I had. The pain was no longer sharp. It was a vast, all-consuming ocean of fire, and I was drowning in it. This became the rhythm of my new life. Each day I was dragged from my dark, silent cell to the whitewashed chamber of screams. I was placed upon the horse, and the weights were attached. And the questions began. Father Tomas was a master of his craft. He did not shout. He whispered. He would describe the cool water I could have to drink, the soft bed I could sleep in, the sunlight I could feel on my face again, if only I would confess. If only I would give him Elena's name. "She is a known heretic," he would murmur, as a guard added another stone to my burning limbs. "Her soul is already damned. You save only yourself. Is your compassion for her greater than your compassion for your own flesh?" Days bled into one another, a blur of darkness and light, silence and pain. My body was a ruin. My legs were a mass of bruised, torn flesh. I could no longer stand on my own. But in the deepest, most broken part of my soul, a small, hard kernel of defiance remained. My crime had been kindness. I would not betray it now. I would not purchase my own relief with the coin of an innocent woman's suffering. My refusal to speak, to give him the lie he so desperately wanted, became my only remaining act of faith. On the 27th day, my mind was a fog of pain and fever. I was barely conscious when they dragged me to the chamber. But this time, something was different. Another person was there, tied to a chair in the corner of the room. It was Elena. Her face was bruised, her eyes wide with a terror that mirrored my own. "The heretic Elena has been uncooperative," Father Tomas said, his voice laced with a triumphant cruelty. "Perhaps watching the consequence of her stubbornness will loosen her tongue, or perhaps watching her suffer will loosen yours." He gestured to the guards, who brought not the weights, but hot coals in a brazier. I watched, helpless, as they approached her, the heat from the coals a shimmering wave in the cold air. That was the moment my spirit finally broke. The thought of my own pain was something I could endure, but the thought of her suffering, of that small, frail boy Mateo becoming an orphan because of a simple act of kindness I had performed, was a torture far beyond anything the wooden horse could inflict. "Stop," I croaked, my voice a dry, rattling sound. "Leave her. I will confess." A slow, victorious smile spread across Father Tomas's face. He waved the guards away from Elena. "At last," he whispered, "the truth finds its way to the light." They took me down from the horse and threw me onto the cold stone floor. A scribe was brought in, his quill scratching eagerly on a fresh sheet of parchment. "Begin," the Inquisitor commanded. And so I lied. I built a fortress of falsehoods to protect the small, fragile truth of my one act of mercy. I confessed to dancing with demons in the moonlight. I confessed to brewing potions that soured the village's milk. I confessed to speaking with the devil and signing his book in my own blood. I wove a tapestry of impossible sins, a fantasy of heresy that made the scribe's eyes grow wide with a mixture of horror and fascination. "And the coven?" Father Tomas pressed, his eyes burning with a hungry light. "The names! Give us the names!" I took a deep, shuddering breath. This was my final act. "There was no coven," I whispered. "I was too powerful, too proud. The devil wanted me for himself alone. I took all the sin, all the guilt, all the heresy upon my own shoulders. I made myself a monster to save an innocent." Father Tomas stared at me, his jaw tight. He had not gotten the names he wanted, the web of conspiracy he had been so sure existed. But he had gotten a confession. He had gotten a witch. It was enough. "You have confessed to heinous crimes against God and the crown," he declared, his voice ringing with hollow triumph. "You will be taken to the Plaza de San Francisco. You will be part of the auto da fe. You will be made an example of." He paused, leaning down until his face was close to mine. "But because you have seen the error of your ways and have confessed, the Holy Office will grant you its final mercy. You will be garroted before the flames are lit." I was dragged from the chamber, past Elena, who was weeping silently in her chair. I met her eyes for a single, fleeting moment, and in that moment she knew. She knew the sacrifice I had made. My final day was a public spectacle. I was paraded through the streets, my broken body carried on a wooden cart, a sign around my neck, declaring me a witch. I was taken to the plaza, where a great pyre of wood had been built. I saw the faces in the crowd, fearful, hateful, and some, like Rodrigo the baker, filled with a smug, righteous pride. They tied me to the stake. As the executioner approached with the iron collar of the garrote, I looked up at the sky, a brilliant, unforgiving blue. I felt no fear. In a world where kindness was a crime and mercy was a sin, my death was not a punishment. It was an escape. My compassion had cost me everything. But in the final silent moments, as the iron tightened around my neck, I held on to one single defiant truth. They had broken my body, but they had not broken my spirit. They had forced a lie from my lips, but they had not touched the simple, honest core of what I had done. I had saved a child. And in the dark, cruel heart of the Spanish Inquisition, that small secret act of mercy was my own quiet, triumphant victory.